Mary Akers likes making things. Even better, she likes making things with other people, collaborating with friends to create something that did not exist before. Over the years, she has co-created a La Leche League group in Panama City, Florida, a charter flight business in Hawaii. She co-founded a marine ecology school in Dominica, co-wrote an inspirational book that sold in 7 countries, co-created the International Hermit Crab Conference, CrabCon, and now with the help of an amazing board of directors, she has brought the nonprofit Hermit House to life, working daily to keep wild hermit crabs wild through captive breeding, education, and conservation. Please welcome my best friend and the world's coolest crab queen, Mary Akers.
Hello, CrabCon attendees. Thank you for supporting the conference, which in turn supports our captive breeding efforts and our newly founded nonprofit, Hermit House. I'm going to talk about hermit crab sentience and the ethics of captive breeding. Human understanding of animal sentience has evolved over the millennia of our shared existence. The treatment of animals is most often driven by the cultural norms of a particular civilization or moment in time. Ancient Egyptians, for example, revered cats. In India, cows are sacred animals. Most Native American cultures honor members of the animal kingdom and even Mother Nature herself. As a word, though, sentience is a slippery term. It's generally understood to mean the ability of a creature to experience a sensation and exhibit a corresponding response. An example of that would be crying out or shrinking back in pain when hurt, and then the subsequent avoidance of any similar pain-causing stimuli. This is actually the most commonly cited method for determining sentience, and it currently guides the determination of animal rights in the United States. So, does the animal in question feel pain? If an animal is determined to have sentience, we are then morally obligated to treat that animal with a certain level of care and respect. Pain may be the most common and basic measure of sentience, especially for animals that are slaughtered for food or used in product testing, but there are more nuanced indicators. According to the ecologist and writer Carl Safina, we can see brains, but we cannot see minds. Yet we can see the workings of minds in the logic of animal behaviors. We see this in the animal that engages in play, that uses a familiar object as a tool, that perhaps works out a puzzle, or that exhibits unique preferences, either in terms of relationships, what in humans we might call having friends, or shows a preference for such things as a favorite food, a particular sleeping spot, or in the case especially of land hermit crabs, a choice of shell. As any keeper of land hermit crabs will tell you, the process of trying on a new shell is quite involved. The hermit crab will not move out of one shell and into another without first determining that the vacant shell has all the necessary amenities. In at least one scientific article, the hermit crab's obvious shell preference was used to make a case for legally assigning sentience to crustaceans. Together, these reports won over legislative bodies in New Zealand, Norway, Switzerland, Canada, and several EU countries. No longer can lobsters be boiled alive in these countries. The observation of shell preference was determined after documenting the length of time hermits spent in consideration of an empty shell before surrendering their current shell. The cautious hermit crab is most vulnerable when out of its shell, and so only makes the change if the new shell is determined adequate. Crabs have been observed measuring the vacant potential shell with their large claw to determine fit. The crab version of checking the label or holding up a pair of potential pants against the body. They will turn the shell to check all sides and also to determine the weight of the shell. Most crabs will pick a lighter shell when given a chance between two outwardly identical shells. After all, mobility and speed are directly related to the weight of one's pants. Once the crab has switched shells, he will tuck deep into the new shell to test the fit and to see if any of his claw covers the opening when retracted. If other crabs are nearby, and they most likely will be, as any sign of an impending empty shell is quite the attraction, the crab will often hold on to his old shell until he determines that the new shell is indeed worth wearing, and then walks away from his old pants. Singularly fascinating behavior has been observed in the wild and even caught on film for a BBC nature documentary. In the film, this behavior was dubbed the Congo line. The Congo line forms when a new shell washes up on the beach. It immediately attracts attention, but if it is too large for the first crabs to arrive on the scene, they stand by and wait. As more crabs arrive, they begin to form a line in descending order of size. Once the crab arrives, for whom the shell is a perfect fit, the line of crabs begin to swap shells in order, each moving up to the next appropriate size and passing the used shell to the next crab in line. These crabs are clearly aware of their size in relation to other crabs. As part of a colony, they wait patiently in the prescribed manner that maintains order in their society. They share their resources. That certainly sounds like sentience to me. Sentience also implies some degree of autonomy and self-awareness. A sentient being can feel, think, learn from, and respond to stimuli. Anthropocentric views tend to dismiss animal sentience, but determination can be as simple as observing an animal seek out and eat something delicious and spit out something nasty. The simple truth is we don't need to know how they feel, what they experience, or how they reason in order to make this determination. Behavior is observable, and observable behavior is a valid and useful form of information when attempting to understand animal preferences. Have you heard of the 5 freedoms? The 5 freedoms are a set of internationally accepted standards for animal care that were established in 1965 by Britain's Farm Animal Welfare Council. The 5 freedoms ensure that we meet the mental and physical needs of sentient animals in our care. Number 1, freedom from thirst. Animals should have ready access to fresh water and a diet that maintains full health and vigor. Number 2, freedom from discomfort and exposure. Animals need an appropriate environment, including shelter and a comfortable resting area. Number 3, freedom from pain, injury, and disease. Prevention of illness or rapid diagnosis and treatment are essentials of good animal care. Number 4, freedom from fear and distress. Animals require sufficient space, proper facilities, and company of their own kind. Number 5, freedom to express normal behaviors. Animals deserve proper conditions with ethical treatment that avoids mental suffering. So, now that I've outlined reasons for why I believe land hermit crabs have sentience, you're probably wondering how sentience squares with captive breeding. How does one rationalize keeping hermit crabs in a confined space and letting them make babies? After 5 years of doing this, I've heard all the criticisms. It's not fair to the crabs. We don't need more crabs when there are already so many in need of homes. The pet trade will never change. It's just making them bougie pets. It's like a puppy mill for crabs. So many larvae die, etc. Trust me when I say I have spent many late night wakeful hours hoping I am doing the right thing for hermit crabs globally. Captive breeding as a philosophy of animal care has many angles to consider, especially when one proposes doing it for the greater good. First off, what is the greater good here? Is it greater good at a species level? Greater good for the individual crab? For the ecosystem? To change the way that hermit crabs are viewed by society? To improve their treatment and care? To end the wild capture for the pet trade? To keep threatened species from disappearing? I say it's all of these things. Why not have big, massive goals? This venture is a very long-term goal with lots of carefully calculated steps along the way. Make no mistake. It's not been undertaken on a whim. It's important to understand that hermit crab breeding is not at all like operating a puppy mill. You don't put a male and female crab together and get tons of babies 6 weeks later. They only mate if they feel healthy and comfortable enough to do so. And while the adults are in my care, I give them the best life I can. They have multiple wheels and saucers for exercise and to mimic the miles they travel in the wild. For fresh and salt water, they have 2.5-gallon bioactive pools. They get a great deal of natural foraged ingredients to pick through and eat as desired. They are fed a varied diet and live in the company of their own kind. After that, if the crabs choose to mate, it leaves me with a hard decision. What do I do with the babies they produce? I tell myself these babies' lives were never promised. They had no chance of survival born in captivity when they need a wild ocean. It helps some when I have failures and lose Zoe. After all, none of our lives are promised. We get what we get, and we do the best we can with the time we have. I console myself with the idea that I am at least giving the Zoe a chance at life. After I'm acting more in the role of midwife or doula, actually. It may seem silly to make that comparison, but consider that 1, you simply cannot convince crabs to mate. It's their call. 2, there's no way to artificially inseminate a crab. You can't force a female to produce eggs. 3, likewise, there's no forcible mating in the hermit crab world. It involves mutually agreed upon exchange of materials. In mating, the male grips the female's shell and gently strokes her legs in an effort to convince her to accept his sperm packet. If she is receptive, she flutters her legs in return to let the male know. This goes on for quite some time, while the male determines if he will entrust her with the sperm. After the exchange of sperm, the male will often guard the female zealously, sometimes for days, in order to ensure that no other male mates with her before she has used his sperm to fertilize her eggs. So, we give them good conditions. The rest is up to the crabs. At any point in the process, things could and often do go awry. For example, mating may not be successful if the female refuses the male's advances or she drops or discards the sperm packet. The eggs may not be correctly fertilized as they are released from the gonophores. After releasing them, the female may not brood her eggs properly, or living conditions may be too cool and the eggs don't mature. The female may drop her eggs on the substrate where they dry out and die or get eaten by other crabs. She may mistakenly spawn in the freshwater pool, killing the zoe instantly. These things happen regularly, so from the start you have an unlikely event, successful mating, plus eggs carried to maturation, plus eggs properly spawned. All of that relies 100% on the crabs. The breeder has no control over any of these elements. Then, if everything proceeds in the necessary manner and the female spawns at the right time and deposits the eggs correctly in the saltwater pool, and the saltwater pool is the correct temperature, salinity, has water movement to help suspend the zoe, they will survive for a day or two, maybe 3, roughly 10,000 of them, if this is an adult female spawning, and if all went according to plan. At this point, the female crab has done her job well, and responsibility now shifts to the human, who is left with a decision: toss the zoe down the sink or attempt to give them a shot at life. The zoe won't survive in the saltwater pool, and they will not all magically walk out a month later wearing a shell. 0 chance of that happening. So, what you as a breeder have to do now is simple. You have to be the ocean. You have to be a self-cleaning, nutrient-rich, oxygen-supplying, ever-moving body of water that stays the same temperature and salinity consistently, with only minor fluctuations in both, for 30 days of larval development around the clock. Another argument against captive breeding that I have heard expressed is that so many zoe die in the process. This is true. Thousands and thousands of them, sometimes in one day. It's a heartbreaking statistic. Breeders have achieved, at best, from start to finish, a survival rate of about 1%, with 0.1% being more common. But it's important to realize that this is quite likely an even better survival rate than that for zoe spawned in the ocean. In the wild, hermit crab larvae are an important food source for many ocean animals. Despite being spawned by the thousands, they make up only a small portion of the vast, floating and free-swimming microflora and fauna in the ocean. This loss rate is built into their genetic plan. Hermit crabs have tens of thousands of babies, so that a lucky 10 may survive to pass along the genetic material of their parents. Like plenty of other animals that generate thousands of offspring, the weaker offspring may even become food for the stronger ones. Like 40 million other viewers, I watched Tiger King when it came out in March of 2020, at the start of the pandemic. We were all stuck at home wondering if the world was breaking, and it was a nice diversion that spawned plenty of clever internet memes. But I watched the episodes of Tiger King unfold with a growing dread, seeing in real time how well-intentioned captive breeding can go awry. Tigers are not crabs, but it was for me a personal cautionary tale. I saw how ethical intentions could grow beyond the scope of control and morph into an unfortunate and desperate situation. When it comes to saving animals, there is a fine line between passionately caring and obsessively hoarding. No one sets out to be a hoarder. It happens over time and involves a great deal of rationalization along the way. Note to self: never become the crab queen. Trust me when I say that you can't think of any objection to captive breeding that I have not already considered and agonized over myself. The ocean has two faces. On the one hand, it is a vast, nurturing expanse, a giant womb, buoying and consistent. There are also times when the ocean gets riled, and turbulence causes particulates to become suspended alongside the food and sand and general detritus. Wind whips the waves into the shore, pummeling the ocean's multitudinous sea creatures in the process. Some days the ocean isn't welcoming. Some days the ocean is dirty and mean. In my first attempt to be the ocean for the Zoe, I had forgotten that other, less kind ocean. I was trying to make everything perfect all the time. That ocean is one in which I am the tiniest mote of existence, and a Zoe even less so, easily by a factor of 100 million. In Dr. Seuss's world, they are the who's that Horton hears. Therefore, if I am to be the ocean for these tiny Zoe, I need to not always be kind either. In fact, to be more accurate, I must be less caring, less forgiving, and let them do the difficult work they need to do in order to grow and survive on their own. I need to be the ocean. I have come to believe that it may be beneficial to deliberately stress the larval hermits in some way in order to encourage them to make the journey to land in captivity and build their resiliency. After all, if the digs are too cushy, why leave? In birds, the young are often pushed from the nest if they hang around too long. Parents understand when it is time for the offspring to fend for themselves. In mammals, the very act of being born is hard and painful for both the child and the mother. But that painful birth does some important work. The birth canal contains beneficial bacteria that the baby ingests while passing through, and which helps to fortify the infant's nascent biome. Being squeezed through the confines of the birth canal also helps to remove fluid from the infant's lungs. If I consider the shoreline of the ocean to be the hermit crab's version of the birth canal, what can I learn from their process? Exiting the water when waves are crashing all around is difficult. Some may get cast onto the beach prematurely before they have decided to make the trek themselves. Will they survive? Will the push to land make them stronger in the long run? Will it give them a competitive edge over the other baby hermit crabs? Will the greater numbers survive when forced onto land? Or will more die? I don't know, but I observe. In the wild, minuscule baby crabs may get returned to the ocean again and again by retreating waves, like Sisyphus and his rock. Will they survive? Perhaps there is an important transitional bacteria present in the intertidal zone that helps to acclimate the baby crab in some essential way. We don't really know. These mysterious musings are not so far-fetched. We're learning more every day about our interconnectedness in this magical and mysterious world we have all been fortunate enough to inhabit for a lifetime, however long that works out to be. Thank you.